So let's look at this URL. We do have a URL with path services slash query parameter version equals 0.1. Imagine there are a lot of requests issued to this URL that may impact the performance of your server. And you want to throttle this URL. You want to limit the rates of requests that might be issued to this URL so you can increase the performance of your server. To make it clear, not everybody needs to throttle a URL. You don't need to throttle your URL if performance is now the issue for your system or for any application you're running on the web server. So request throttling in Django REST framework works the same as any throttling in computing. As we all know that throttling in computing is simply a technique used to restrict or limit access to any resource-intensive system in order to improve performance. So Django REST framework use throttling as a technique to allow a request or deny a request to the server. And simply throttling works the same as permission, except when you throttle your request in Django, you are simply working on layer 4. The throttle happen in Django REST framework is on layer 4. It's now throttling on layer 2, which is the IP layer. So when you throttle your request in Django REST framework, it doesn't guarantee a protection against DDoS attack. The DDoS attack stands for distributed denial of services, which happen in layer 2. So do not confuse throttling the endpoints or URL as a security technique to protect your system against any attack that will deny service for your server. If you want to protect your application against DDoS attack, not only you need to throttle on layer 4, but you also need to use some technique on layer 2, like a DPI, which inspects your packet on layer 2 IP to protect against DDoS attack. So in this case, we are talking about application throttling on layer 4, HTTP, and it does not guarantee a protection against the DDoS attack, just so you can know. So how Django REST framework throttle your URL? It simply gets a request from a user, and it checks if the request has a X forwarded for header, or the X forwarded for header contain a list of IP which is one of the IP of the user requesting resource from the server. Okay, let me make it simple. When you issue a request to Django REST framework, we check if you do have the X forwarded header. If you don't have the X forwarded header, Django REST framework, we check the IP address of the requester and save that IP address with some chunk, some hash, using the cache, the default cache, the lock memory cache. And then from the next request, Django REST framework will compare the IP of the requester, the decrements from the cache server, to do some calculation if the request should be allowed or the request should be denied according to the time period or the amount of requests that can be issued to a particular endpoint. We will look at that in practice and see how Django REST framework throttle an endpoint using the X remote address or the X forwarded address. Let's go on the demo and see how you can simply throttle a request or limit the rates, the amount of requests that can be applied on any URL in Django REST framework. As we know, when we set the configuration for REST framework, for Django REST framework, some of the properties or configurations might be global, which means any key value we set on this dictionary will be global. There are also some of the configuration that may be applied exclusively to some of the view. As we can see somewhere here on the versioning class, we saw that the premium is using a different versioning class, which is the query parameter versioning. To set the global setting for throttling, we need to define the default throttle class property or key, since we are using a dictionary here. Default throttle classes, which is a list of class the framework dot calling. The first one is the anonymous rates throttle. The anonymous rates throttle handle all the requests coming from the unauthenticated user. And we also have the user rates throttle class that handle all the requests coming from authenticated user. After setting the defaults throttle class, we also need to set the defaults rates, throttle rates. The default throttle rates just gets the maximum number of requests that these two classes will be accepting before they throttle any request. So we got the default throttle rates, and we have the scope NN, which is stand for, it's a short word for anonymous. For any anonymous user, for any user that's unauthenticated, let's say that we have 10 requests per minute before the request or the URL endpoints get throttled. And for any authenticated user, let's give them 1,111 requests before they get just make it simple. Let's make it 901 requests before the endpoints or the URL gets throttled. That's the global setting that will be applied to all URL, to all view for the project, Django project, which means these URL, whether the URL coming from policy application or customer and or premiums, all of them will be subject to these rules, which means if a user is unauthenticated, they will get 10 requests per minute. If they are authenticated, they will get 901 requests a day before the endpoint gets throttled. To demonstrate that, we can simply let's try to curl our famous customer localhost 1000 ports We have customers dash customers. Data. Okay, we didn't specify the verb. The verb is get. It's not found. V1 custom. Okay, it looks like it's valid. So let's specify the header. We want to accept application JSON MIME type with indents of or space. Not yet. Let's look at the customer. What's the customer sending to us? Again, this. There we go. So we got the customer. This is just a simple data when we are testing customer. So the customer will return dictionary, JSON objects with keyword with the key data and the response from customer. So if we count that 1, 2, 3, and this is the third request, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7, 8, 9, 10, and the next one we throw an arrow, 420, 29 arrow, which means the request is being throttled. As you can see, request was throttled, expected available in 3 seconds. That's the way we can throttle an anonymous user. Bear in mind, we didn't authenticate before we get this URL, so we're using the anonymous, which means we're using this class anonymous rates throttle. If we want to test the way the user can be authenticated, we may, let's use the browser. Localhost 1000 admin. I want to make sure we log in, so the users are logging. Let's try V1 customer dot custom. Customer, it looks like customer doesn't have. We can't pass the accept data for customer. Since customer is just a simple JSON object, let's use policy v1 policy. Policy is not found. That's Yeah. This is the response for policy. Let's make sure that we're retaining all the data from policy, so we can make sure everything works fine. What is policy? So in the previous video, we were testing, how we can use the URL path, versioning with policy. So that's why policy is so simple. But if we want to make sure that we query the data from policy model, we need to make sure we import the policy. We have a policy and the policy serializer. Again, policy serializer exists. We have the query states for the policy. pretty much all we need. Getting some error. There we go. So we got policy data. No, probably the server was just trying to refresh. We got policy data, and now that we are authenticated, we are using a user JCooler is authenticated. We can request as much as we can for this particular URL or usage. We just keep requesting until we reach the maximum rates, which is 901 per day. And then this request can throttle. As you can see, we keep requesting, but as long as we keep requesting, as long as the number of the requests is under 900, this, or I mean the URL will never throttle any request. So that's the way we can use default setting for the unauthenticated user and the authenticated user. It is also a term, the concept of scope rate throttling, which may be applied to a specific view set. Let's look at our policy. Let's look at our premium. So what's happening with premium? We use premium to test the query parameter versioning. Let's see what's premium's doing. As you can see, we have item manage test premium. Yeah, so a valid URL for premium should be premium/premium with an optional query parameter version. So if we wanna use the scope rate throttling, which can only be applied for this particular view sets, we can use a property called throttle class, and we need to import a scope throttle class from REST framework. Import scope rate throttle, and we apply that here. And we also need to define a property which is the main property before applying scope rate throttling. The property name is throttle scope. We can name the scope premium. And of course, we are not getting any data about premium, so why not use query sets? So we can query sets premium objects on. Let's import from premium model, imports premium model, and we also need the serializer class. Serializer class, let's call that premium serializer. Of course, we don't have a premium serializer class. We need to create a new serializer premium new serializer. We can add tracking.file from REST framework. Serializer, let's import now the serializer. We can create a class called premium serializer, which inherits property from model serializer. Serializer. We need a subclass meta with property model equal premium from premium model premium. Not a property of field. Yeah, let's apply all, which will return a list of all read from premium. That's all we need. We have to import premium serializer from premium serializer, import premium serializer. There we go. Of course, we have comments out or the implementation of list because we don't want to customize list. We'll be using the default implementation of list, which automatically gets the query sets, serialize that, and response. Send out on the response object. Okay, let's check the premium. Localhost 8000 v1, but we don't need v1 since we're using the query parameter versioning. We can just pass premiums. Okay, premium throw the error. No default throttle rate set for premium. So what's happening here is that although we've defined the throttle scope, which is a required property when using the scope rate throttling, when Django is trying to get the maximum number of requests for this particular scope premium, in the class scope rates, he's trying to find premium as a scope in our global setting, and we didn't set a premium. So a premium, scope doesn't exist. We can just pass premium and set the maximum, let's say 12 per minute. This is to say, with scope premium, we need 12 requests per minute before the endpoints or the URL get throttled. Let's try again. Need to refresh. It's kind of like applying. Okay, there we go. Now we have our premium endpoints or URL. So if we refresh 1, 2, okay, attention, we are logged in. If we are logged in, and we're still using the premium, which is a scope rate throttle, Django will consider the premium rates throttle over the global user. So, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 as the throw. There we go. So it's working. So even if we are logging, we are not using the user rate throttle, we're using the scope throttle that is applied to the scope throttle, which overrides the global setting. Okay, guys, that's all for throttling a request in Django REST framework. There is more, of course, talk about about throttling. For this particular video, we wanted to talk about how to set the global configuration to throttle requests, and also the way we can create the scope throttling for a particular view of view set in Django REST framework. In the next video, I will demonstrate how to create a customized rate throttle or a customized throttle that may be applied to different verbs. Let's say we don't want to throttle this request on past. We just want to throttle that on get or delete. How should we go about that? Thank you for watching. I'll see you.